In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about setting up our specification drawing. I've used other terms for this. We can call it a drafting. Another term, which is probably more appropriate for us, is a design control drawing. Since we're not doing any elaborate engineering with mechanics and in-depth material specifications, we are trying to just show our design. We have our shape that we had sculpted. We're considering molding. So we're going to show what we're thinking about molding. We might be incorporating a stock cap, or if we have a custom cap with some functionality, we could talk about that functionality, but we're not necessarily going to be the engineers for this. We're going to communicate with engineers with this drawing and to show our design. So that's where the term design control drawing. We want to control our shape and our aesthetic that we had worked out here. So we can use that expression also. So I have these set up, our orthographic views. We had done that in our gray design exploratory. So it would be the same thing, our front view, our side view. So I have this on a separate layer, and I move these around to get that. The one view I haven't talked about is the one way over on the left here, which is a section view. It's not absolutely imperative, but some designs need a little bit more explanation by setting up a section view. So I have this set up over here. So this is my, it's another copy of the bottle I have. This particular bottle, I have a wall thickness. I got this from the tutorial I did on doing a rendering in PET, where I actually created a wall, a thin wall, which is a realistic wall of about 35 thousandths of an inch. So I have that in there. It's not necessary for these other views. That can be solid because we're just doing the exterior dimensions. But for a cross section, we need to show that wall thickness. So I brought that in, and I'm just going to trim split that with a line. With line, and I have it on stitch because I want to seal up that wall. So I'm going to click on one half my object and trim that. And let me just color that in white so we can see it. So that is, and you can see the wall thickness all around that edge. So when I put that into our views, we'll be able to see that particular dimension there. So now I have this, let me just do it in like a color or something so you can see. Oops. So that's the geometry and our wall thickness. As you can see our parting line on the other side, and we have that little edge. So I'm going to set this up with a non-reflective color. This white block here, it's just called constant. Under reflection, I have it white. And if you put constant on, it doesn't reflect any light at all. So it basically disappears the surface and you see just the lines. So I'm going to use that constant color. So now I have just the color, and I am going to put a gray color just on the cross section. I'm not going to use cross section hatches, which we could. Just a little more complicated to do that, but I'm going to use a non-reflective gray. And I'm going to select that face, which is just this edge. There, I selected that. And I'm going to color that, but I'm going to color that with keep current materials on, which means it's not going to color the entire object, just that one part that I have selected. So if I use that, and I color that, so now that edge is gray, because that's what I want to emphasize is this cross section. And then of course my curve details. So I'm going to take that and I put that in, I just rotated that and put the cap on it just as a placeholder and put it in that view. So when I look at it in that orientation, it will give me that view. Okay, so front, so there it is. And I'm going to set up the color on that because I didn't do that here. So I'm going to use the constant color, and I'm going to select that face. It might be already selected. This, I'm going to color that in the gray. Yeah, it looks like it's already selected. So that's ready to go. So by also using this, making it all white, it kind of stands out. And I'm also going to label it of what that is, that cross-section view. Okay, so that'll have, this is all our orthographics all set up. So we need to go to our dimension area. So go under File, go to Project Settings, and go to Dimensions. And you're going to set up a new style. So plus sign and style 1 will come up. And we are going to modify all these specifications here. I've already done that, so I'm going to explain that. And I'll provide a 2D image of this with these specifications. But then again, you can modify that depending on the size of your drawing. I have selected 300 thousandths, which is like a little over a quarter of an inch for the height of my copy. So that's font size. I have placement on, which means it's going to be between the lines, which you'll see. I'll have my dimension lines and there'll be a break and the dimension will be right in the center. That's just a preference. I'm leaving it on this typeface. It works really well for engineering drawings. I'm including units. You can leave text between witness lines off at this point. There's only a few situations where you might want to do that. Include units. So for inches, it's the 2 little tick marks. And I do horizontal on screen, which means all the dimensions will be horizontal regardless of which way the dimension goes. Terminators, it's our arrowheads. I used filled arrow on both of them. And the height is how long the arrowhead is. I have 3/8 of an inch, and then the width is the height of it, the thickness of that. Like I had mentioned before, I keep these kind of lean. I like them very pointy. Witness lines are the lines that come from the object and go to the dimension line where the arrow head goes to. It's to show us where we're dimensioning, because sometimes we pull that off the object quite far, so we need to know where that dimension is going to. So witness lines, I'm going to do it at start and end, so it'll always show up. Offset means how far away from the object it is, and extension is how far that witness line extends beyond the end of that arrowhead. I put that on 1/4 of an inch. I'm not going to use, for my units, we have 3 decimal places that we had specified for our working units. That's very good for building. We get really excellent accuracy by doing that. When I do dimensions, I don't want it to go 3 decimal places because that's a little bit overkill. It's much too finite. So I go to custom, select on custom and under options. All I'm doing is changing this to 2 decimal places. And then also putting this here, so my accuracy is 0.01. It's still very accurate. We just don't need the 3 decimals. And of course, I'm working in engineering. You can also set this up for metric. So that's it for that. So now we're ready to dimension. Let's view the top here. So you can see I have all my views away from my working plane. That red line is my working plane. So I'm going to set everything back, because when I do these dimensions, they are going to be on that plane in front of my objects. It's going to be a bit strange to do a drafting this way, but I like doing everything right here in the one interface. FormZ does have another program that they use for a 2D layout specifically. All it really is a pared down version of this FormZ, emphasizing the drafting tool. So it's all the line tools that we have here. So there's no compromise. I just like to do everything right here, because why not? It works out really well. And this way, we're not redrawing. We're not drawing a drafting. All we're doing is taking a picture of this object that we have already built, and we're just putting in orthographics with dimensions on it. So we don't have to redraw all these shapes. We have it. It's ready to go. So if you go to your front view, now we have all our dimensions. Under text here, this is all our drafting tools right here. The one we're going to use the most is a linear dimension. This will be for vertical and horizontal. So I'll review how to use these. So with that in place, all we have to do is select our entities on here. Okay, it's not snapping. Here, select that. Okay, so I'm snapping. I don't have my points on, but I know I'm snapping to the end of that radius here. I'm snapping to the bottom of the bottle, and I'm going to snap to just under the closure. Right here. And I can come out. See, it's coming out because I went in crooked, but I can also straighten that out. So positioning this is going to be the challenge, because there's going to be lots of dimensions, and I'll show you how that works out. So sometimes you'll dimension these, it's going to get in the way, you'll delete it, you'll redimension it, you'll move things around. So it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error to get this to work. But what's nice is everything's all set. Here's my dimension line, my witness lines. I have my copy size and my units on there, and it sits in there very nicely. And I prefer this horizontal on the page. So that's that dimension. And you can use the exact same tool for horizontal dimensions. Now I'm going to click on just above that radius on both sides. And I can come down there and double click, and I have that dimension, which is the width of the bottle, and so forth and so on. So everything can be dimensioned. And I can, even select parts of here. I can snap to this radius, snap to that radius, and dimension that detail, how high it is, and all those things can be dimensioned. So that's horizontal and vertical. Another way to do, it's a little bit of a workaround, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So I'm going to show how to use a leader line and why you would use that. Let me do this dimension again, and I'll show you another feature. If you want to do a dimension like this, and I'm going to leave it selected here in orange, and I can come over here and I have some options. I can change the text, by the way. I can, if 150 is not correct, or I'm adding up with another number, I can modify that slightly if I want. This is on center. I could do it at start, which puts the copy at where I started the dimension. And of course, I can put that at end. So we can move that around because sometimes it gets in the way and I want to have that. So we have that option there. I do like the option of putting my arrowheads outside of my witness lines. And I gang up a lot of dimensions on center, which we had talked about when we did our last drafting for the last project. It doesn't give me that feature. I am talking to them about getting that, but right now they don't have that. So what I do is a little bit of a workaround. Under the dimensions here, we have a leader line. A leader line, I can create my own dimension. So I'm going to build my own witness lines. Let me do this in line. Oh, wrong tool. I just want to draw a line. Why is it doing that? Sorry. Just draw a line. And I'm just going to move a copy over. This is just another way of dimensioning, which does give you some more flexibility, and it can come in handy. Okay, let's see, that's where I want to be. This leader line is designed to point to things. Like I could point to something, and I double click, and I can write a note. It could be a number. I could be pointing to something and say, this is a certain radius or blend here or anything I want. It's just an arrowhead. All I want is the arrowhead. So I'm just going to eliminate that, have no copy. So when I let it go, it's just my arrowhead. So now I can take this and I can do things with it. I can move it around, put it where I want, and I can add type to that. So I'm just going to mirror this over. Oh, copy. It's not mirroring. Okay. Okay. Why is it doing this? There we go. Okay, so now I've talked about this before. Like if I have some other in-mold details and I want to dimension that in between these two witness lines, I can do that. So all I have to do is I could have added a note to one of these if I wanted to, because that's what that's designed. But I just go into notes. And I'm just going to click here and I can put, I think that was 1.5 inches. So now I have these as independent parts. So I can leave it here in the center. I can put it off to one side. I can put it here. Because when you get involved with this page layout, with all these dimensions, this can come in handy if I need to spread out these dimensions and not use the standard format that they have. So that's using the leader line to create a dimension. So the other big part of dimensioning is radiuses. So we have angle tools and multiple dimensions and other things like that. But I'm just going to talk about these main tools that we have here. So radiusing, when the geometry has a radius that's actually drawn there, it will, like I'm picking that little corner down there, and I'm just clicking on it, and I can move this around. And again, when it comes to page layout, I might want it like farther away. I might want it really close. I can specify that. And I click, and then there it is, and it gives me that radius. So I don't have to even necessarily measure anything. Just click on my entities, and it'll give me the numbers, and it'll measure it. Now, with that being said, sometimes that doesn't work. So for example, the top of this arc here and this in-mold detail, that is a radius. And the bottom one is too. It's a radius, and it goes to a straight. So since that is traveling in space, it's not actually a flat radius. It's curving around the front of the bottle, but it's a radius from the front view. I'm going to specify that curve from the front view. And if I use my radius tool, it won't read that as a radius because it's not flat. It's curving in space. So this is another little bit of a workaround. So what I have to do is draw that geometry just to put a dimension to it. This circle tool is very helpful for picking out radiuses. It's a 1, 2, 3 selection. I can select anywhere on this radius with that tool active. It's like selecting at the top of that radius. I'm going to pick here. I'm just kind of arbitrary. I'm going to pick there. And then my third spot is over here. Now that is locking perfectly to that radius. And now I have this circular geometry, again, on my working plane in front of my object, so it's not hidden. Now I can select that and radius that and lay that out where I want to have that. So with my radius tool selected, I can click on this. It illuminates, and I can move this around. I mean, I could bring a leader line, I could bring a witness line out here and draw it outside of my object, which could work, and it might, layout-wise, might be better. In this particular situation, I was able to fit that right up in here. So once I find out where I want it, I just select it. Again, this is going to all have to do with my layout. I'm going to show you the entire layout, and it gets a little confusing. So that's doing the radiuses. So once you get all these dimensions done, I have my section view. I'm just going to eliminate these. In this particular situation, I put all the dimensions on a separate layer so I could organize this presentation, not have it all come up at once. So I have my dimensions on another layer just to show you how all this is going to fit. I'm going to get rid of the axis in the grid, and I'm going to put this on because this is how I'm going to ultimately view that. I guess we could talk about that. We do have wireframe. And then we have our interactive gray shader, shaded work display. I'm going to be using, and I recommend you use shaded full display. It gives us this nice view. It's a little bit of highlights, a little bit rendered view of our object. I like doing this instead of keeping everything strictly in line. We can do it in line, just like I have my cross section here. It just looks a little bit nicer. It's a better presentation, and you can really see the object. So that's just a matter of preference. I like doing it this way. So here's all my dimensions. You can see how the radius is, and I brought all the different components and laid them up. In my section view, I specified the depth of these two things, how, you know, the radius of this concave oval area, and then how deep this little in-mold detail is. Those are the kinds of things that will show up very nicely in a section view. Again, everybody's object is different. You might do a cross section that's from a top view or from a different direction, from the front view perhaps. It all depends on what kind of details we want to show. Now, if it doesn't really do anything for us, you don't need to show it. Okay, so once all these dimensions are in place, the next thing I do is I put my border in, because now I know it's going to kind of fit. I need to leave room for my title block and my notes, and then my 3/4 view of my object that I'm going to put over on the right-hand side. So the next step is picking a page size. I do everything full size because I can. It's in FormZ here, and I can draw it even a chair, I could draw it full size. So I don't scale when I'm designing. The only scaling that happens is when we save out an image of our drafting and we print it for a meeting or to talk to someone. That's when it gets scaled. So I don't write a scale, I do full scale because I'm going to send a 3D file, a DXF or a DXW of this, or I might even bring this into Illustrator, and I will have it full size. And when I give that to them, there'll be a page dimension and it's full, and they can actually measure and look at the details. So that will be the specification drawing. When I print it, that's only for us to look at in a meeting, maybe to red line it or to have it as a discussion piece. It's just a preliminary document to take a look at. Sometimes people will sign off on them. And at that point, we'll say scaled image, and we'll say that look, refer to the original drawing. So I hope that's not too confusing. So everything I do full size. What I do is I proportion my border to fit on a printable page. Quite often I'll print these on 1117, fold it in half, and I can put that into a document for a presentation when I do face-to-face. So I like the 8.5, 11 folded in half, 1117. So I will take the 1117 proportion and I will scale it up so it fits nicely around what I have detailed here in my specification drawing. And I keep a pretty even number. I scaled it up here and I made this one 21 inches by 14, I believe. It fit very nicely. And I'll bring that in. So this is my border. The thin outside line is the actual dimension of my paper. So that is, I think this is approximately proportion to 1117. And in my situation, it's 21 inches wide by 14 inches high. And I looked at it and I did my title block, I put my notes in, and I said to myself, okay, this fits pretty well. I can get this in here. This thicker line is not really a line, it's actually a 2D wall. The line tools in here, they don't give me enough range of thickness. So I like to, you can see here's the whole picture here. I like to use the 2D wall tool. So I'll show you what that is. So if you select the rectangular tool, I can draw that with a 2D wall, which is right here. And I believe I did that at 200 thousandths. So, but, oh no, I did a lot less. So you can click on that. So instead, I probably did eighth. Let's see, 0.12. That looks about right. Maybe in less, 0.09. It's about like that. So you can draw that. And then I draw that about, I think I might have done a 1/4 inch in from that. You could do 3/8, ½ inch. The reason we have borders on engineering drawings is because we want to communicate that this is the entire drawing. When there's a border, an engineer looks at it and goes, okay, this is the entire drawing, and here's the title block with the specific information. Because quite often people will crop out and only print sections of a drawing. Like I might do the front view of this drawing because it talks about certain dimensions or the cross section. And I might send that to an engineer and say, here's a detail. That engineer can look at that and go, he doesn't see the border, he doesn't see a title block, so he knows this is only a fractional part of a complete drawing. It's just a way of communicating that we have our entire drawing connected here. So you can make this black. So under colors, I think I just colored this in and just made it completely black. It still looks a little thick, but I like that nice thick drawing there. So I did that with the 2D layout tool. So now it's a matter of setting up the display image. So display image is our size. I'm going to save this out as a JPEG. Image options. We've done this before with other views. So I'm going to do it by size. So here I have the 21 by 14. 300 DPI is good. If you have some detail, you could go higher. So if I set up that and I go to fit, it should fit. And it doesn't. And I'll show you why. I have this little extra space over here. When I did this radius dimension, it automatically puts in its center point, which is that little tiny little center point right on the edge there. And I can't get that to go away. So what I do is to get this to work, I'll just ghost that dimension temporarily. I'll just ghost that and then go to fit. Now I'm perfectly set in that page in those dimensions. And then I can just unghost this. And I don't want that. So I saved, that's how I did that. So let's make that go away. Okay, and here we are. Okay, so the notes in the title block, similar to how we did, right side, front view, section view, all the notes that I have on here. We have a tool in here called Notes. I think I used that when I demonstrated the leader line. If you select that and you click in space, you can write a list of notes. And that's how I created the title block. So I don't want that. I want to edit. I'm going to edit this title block. Let's say I want to go back in there and make some changes. You can select the notes. It'll illuminate in red. Now, inspector is how we evaluate our geometry. If you go under inspector, after that's been illuminated, you can go to parameters. This dialog box comes up, and these are all the notes in that dialog box. So I can come in here and type whatever I want. And I can go in there and edit that and do it. And that's how I created this box. At first, I just wrote down the titles of the different things, and then I went back in there and I filled it out. So for our situation, we'll write the assignment, we'll write down the part, what your bottle is. I just made up a drawing number. Material, this is going to be a PET bottle. Who's it drawn by, who's it approved by, scale, full, and date. And there are lots of variations on title blocks. Something like this is the bare necessities. Quite often an engineer will get much more technical. They'll have tolerances and very specific material gauges, and there's a whole series of different things. Since we're not engineering and we're doing a design control drawing, this is a good title block for this. So you can communicate what it is, and an engineer can work with this geometry. So when you're done accessing that, you just apply, and that'll make those modifications. And that's exactly how I did the notes. So in between, I left this space, and I'm going to, in Illustrator, I'm going to bring in, I'm going to save out a JPEG. In Illustrator, I'm just going to take the 3/4 view that I had created a while ago of this bottle and put that in there. It's nice to see a nice 3/4 inch view and the 3/4 view, and it really communicates what we're talking about. So I think that's an overall summary of creating your design control drawing, your spec drawing, or drafting, what do you want to call that? Okay.